Wes LeFroy is a Senior Agricultural Analyst at Rabobank. Thanks for joining us on Flow, Wes.
Thanks very much for having me.
Well, we wanted to reach out to our friends at Rabobank. We talk a lot with some of your commentators like Dennis Vosnesensky on things like grains and wool, but looking on the other side, the prices are looking flash, but what about input costs? That's the big concern going into the winter cropping season.
Well, unfortunately, from the input side, inputs prices are heading back in the same direction as grain prices, and that's upwards. Really, so far this year, it's actually, it was initially good news. We saw global urea prices actually falling, but now as a result of the Ukraine crisis, the price pressure for urea particularly is coming back on, and I'm focusing here on urea because that's the main focus for growers at the moment who are looking to buy product ahead of their winter and spring applications here. But yeah, there's three main ways that we see the Ukraine crisis pushing fertiliser prices higher. One is on the supply side, so Russia is a large global exporter. Two is on port access, so we're seeing heavy restrictions, particularly in the Black Sea, and then also natural gas. Russia is a big supplier of natural gas into Europe, which is used in the urea production as well. So quite an array of impacts.
Yeah, so that's a concern on the fertiliser front. I know we spoke with Grain Growers Limited, I think, late last year about trying to secure supplies if you could get your hands on it as early as possible. But I think that's proven even more prudent given what's happening in Ukraine.
Yeah. So we, unfortunately, as I said, initially the fundamentals for the year, particularly on the urea side, were looking better than they were. We saw urea prices peaking in Australian dollar terms. Global prices peaked at just over $1,200 a tonne. We actually saw them drop back in February to around just above $800 a tonne, and they're kicking up quite significantly now. One of our challenges at the moment is actually getting a read on the rate of the rise of global prices, just given that there's so much uncertainty in the market. A lot of companies across the globe are a little bit reticent to offer prices at the moment. So hopefully we'll have some more clarity on exactly the rate of the rise in the next week or so.
All right, well, let's shift across to chemicals and sprays. A wetter season and soil moisture profiles, meaning there's going to be a bit more need for sprays as well. And I understand there's a decent amount of that comes out of the Black Sea region as well.
So a lot of our agrochemicals actually comes from China, and in particular glyphosate supplies. And now a lot of our glyphosate will actually be on farm or in the country already. But we actually have seen agrochemical prices come back slightly. Now, global agrochemical prices have come back around 10 or 20%. Now, particularly in China, we have seen we have seen better supply than expected through the Winter Olympics period and also through the Chinese New Year. So we're expecting that will flow through to the local market in the next couple of months. So I think the fundamentals for the agrochemical market are looking better than they were at the end of last year, but we're certainly not expecting that the prices will drop to the lows that we saw in 2019 and 2020 for agrochemicals.
All right, so we've got a bit of good news in a sandwich here. The last part of the sandwich is fuel prices and crude oil price. I think there was an action going into Thursday overnight from the International Energy Agency, including Australia, to put some more barrels of oil, about 60 million, I think, to try and stem this spike in the oil price.
Well, I saw Joe Biden as well in his State of the Union address announced release of some strategic reserves in the US for the global market. So we had to see the impact of that. But we're expecting that crude oil will increase to around 118 USD per barrel. At the moment, it's around 105 to 108. So we're expecting to hit that 118 mark in the second quarter. And local diesel prices tend to track crude oil very closely. So unfortunately, we don't have good news on the oil front. I think the one thing to watch, though, on the crude oil side is what's happening with Iran. We haven't seen too many headlines on it. But we have heard some rumblings that there's some negotiations happening between the US and Iran, which could bring some more oil to the global market. So I think that's something to watch closely, and if that eventuates, we might see a small amount of relief for global oil prices.
Well, you mentioned President Biden. I think he's under some domestic pressure from voters who are saying, well, when you keep buying oil from Russia, you're helping finance them attacking Ukraine, so they probably are desperately looking for somewhere else to get their supply needs from.
I think it indicates that Australian growers aren't alone here facing high price of fuel. It's something that we're feeling right across the globe. Natural gas prices, as we talked about earlier in the context of urea, are back at record highs across Europe in particular, which isn't great news given the cold temperatures over there for local consumers. So high energy costs is a challenge being faced by everyone at the moment.
Yeah, I guess it's a very good point to finish on, actually, that oil price or fuel cost issue is a constant, in a sense, in the market for everyone. So if we're getting better prices here, we're still ahead of other farmers around the world.
Yeah, that's a good point. So in terms of competitiveness and input costs, everyone across the globe and all growers across the globe will be feeling that pain in terms of fueling their tractors and all sorts of things as well.
Well, Wes, thanks for that. We wanted to touch base on those input cost challenges. At least some positive news on the sprays front. We'll keep an eye on that going forward. Thanks for your time today.
Yeah, so some marginally good news on the spraying front, and hopefully we see that flowing through the local market in the next couple of months.